Welcome back to STL Live. I'm Sarah Thompson, and my guest is Cindy Clark, CEO and President of Emmaus Homes. Thank you for being here again. Yeah, and thank you. We talked a bit about Emmaus Homes in the first segment and the Missouri Association of Rehabilitation Facilities. I want to kind of get into the more topical and of the moment sort of issues, and one of them is the workforce crisis. And could you give me a bit more details about that and what's happening right now? That's of extreme importance, really.
Absolutely. Well, there is a workforce crisis amongst direct support professionals, and that's the individual that provides services to the person with a disability. So there was a recent article about prison guards in Missouri, and that prison guards, Missouri was having difficulty recruiting prison guards, but we learned through the article that prison guards make $13.85 an hour as a starting wage. There's also a recent study that shows across Missouri that people that provide direct support for individuals with disabilities, their average starting wage is only $9.50 an hour. We know that from the same study that there's 60% turnover in that industry, and that's much higher than it is any place across the nation. It's about 15 points higher than the national average, and it makes us the second worst in the nation. Folks that hire into this position, often 70% left within 1 year of employment. So let me lay out for you what that looks like for the life of somebody with a disability. So imagine that you have a disability and you have difficulty communicating, and you may need help from your support person to bathe and to feed. But every day you could have a different individual coming into your house to provide service. So because you have difficulty communicating, you can't really express what your wants and needs are. When you work with somebody for a long period of time, you're able to gauge other signals that help with communication. But this constant turnover is very distressing for the individual receiving the service and also for their family members.
So what then becomes the next step? I mean, what are you, and not to put it on what are you doing about it, but what is being done about it?
Sure. Well, that's where our advocacy comes in. You know, we spend a lot of time working with the Missouri legislature, educating them on our issues and people with disabilities. But our funding is a Medicaid funded service, and so it is always under scrutiny, and it is very difficult for us to receive increases. So by comparison, there's an actuarial study that shows that these services can be underfunded as much as 40%. But last year we received a 3% rate cut across all community-based services. And over the last 8 years, we've only received a 3% rate increase. So you can see that these services are significantly underfunded, and that's really what prohibits community providers from providing this service. But community services are really the high quality, low cost option for services to people with disabilities. The only other alternative is to serve people in institutionally based settings, and we know that institutional settings are a much higher cost option. Our services are provided in an individual's community, in their home. They have far more choice, and it's a far less expensive option for Missourians.
And it starts to, what you're describing, sort of tilt back into this dangerous cycle of where things were decades and decades ago.
Exactly.
And so all that work that has been done. So for someone listening to this, outside of sort of the advocacy and the lobbying work, what can an individual do? I mean, is this a lot of this changing perception about this, or how can we shift our mindset to recognize this as a major priority and our way of thinking about it?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing somebody could do is come to work for a community provider. I mean, honestly, if you're a retired person, perhaps you could pick up a few shifts a week, or if you're in college, we could certainly accommodate that schedule, or maybe you need a second job. We have all types of opportunities to provide services that might fit your lifestyle. And then to continue to talk to your legislators about how important services are to people with disabilities, and that you think that that funding is important.
I was mentioning to you off camera that I know in years past we've covered interviews similarly on a different topic, but with cutting sort of decreased spending and cuts to mental health, for example. And I know it feels like an uphill battle. When you're looking at it from your perspective, where do you think that you can get to that point, that you can sort of the tipping point to make things better, to get increased funding? Do you have, is there, I know that there's not one answer, but do you see the next step that can be done? I mean, and what would that be? Beyond the obvious, which is getting increased funding, but what can immediately, do you think, be done? We've talked about some of it just now, but what else?
Sure. You know, it is a very complex problem because Missouri is a crisis-only state, so we like to fund services for folks that are only in crisis. But if you start to fund services for people who aren't in crisis, we can keep them in their homes longer, and those are less expensive supports, and so to continue to look also at funding that is not just crisis-based.
Okay, all right, well thank you so much for being here today and sharing this information with us. We've got some information there for you on the screen. The first is the graphic for MARF. This is the Missouri Associations of Rehabilitation Facilities. For more information, you can go to marf.cc. We also have the information to reach out to Emmaus Homes. Their website is emmaushomes.org. And Cindy, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well there's more STL Live right after this. Please stay with us.